What's going on, guys? My name is Austin. This is the Bodies and Business Podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about one of the guys that has had a huge impact in my life over the years. In these episodes, I've started to think about what I can pass on to my listeners so that they can hear things that have made a dramatic impact on my life and kind of shaped who I am. And so today's episode, we're going to deep dive Simon Sinek. All right. And I want to read a little bit about this guy before I go on so you get a good understanding of who he is. If you've ever heard the phrase start with why, there's a good chance it came from Simon. Over the last 15 years or so, his ideas have reached millions of people through his talks, books, and presentations. And they fundamentally changed the way a lot of leaders think about purpose, trust, and long-term success. Simon is the author of 3 books that really stand out. Start with Why, he wrote in 2009, Leaders Eat Last in 2014, and then he wrote a book called The Infinite Game in 2019. Each one builds on the last, but as the core, they all ask the same question. How do we create environments where people actually want to show up, do their best, and stick around for the long haul? So one of the main reasons why I wanted to do these podcasts like this anyway is because I believe that when somebody hears something that is positive and beneficial to their lives, it can like change the trajectory of their life, because things that you hear that are impactful on a positive manner can really make a difference in your life. And the first time I listened to Simon's Start With Why presentation, which was at TED Talks, was when I was a senior in college. I was at a national rugby tournament with the Air Force Academy, and I listened to his TED Talk. I don't know exactly. I think I was in my hotel room and I couldn't sleep, and I listened to his TED Talk. But essentially, it was like one of those moments where it was mind blowing to me, because like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Because the reason why I found it to be so helpful for me is because I don't know what it is about myself, but I dream big. All right. I want to do things that are very impactful for the world and for myself. And I like to take on big, challenging things that maybe I won't reach, but maybe I do. And it makes a big impact and has a positive impact on the world. And in this talk, Simon talked about Martin Luther King, Apple, and what was the third one? I can't remember the third one right now, but he talked about the Wright brothers. And I was like, man, those people have made huge impacts on the world. And he explained, talked about the golden circle. And I want to talk a little bit more about why Simon is so impactful when he does this type of stuff, when he writes his books, when he does his presentations, and he does interviews and stuff. So here are the reasons why I love to listen to Simon Sinek and the message that he brings. He's a deep thinker. Obviously, he wrote these books, and it takes a long time to really dive deep into the human psychology and write these types of books and do these types of presentations. He's obsessed with human beings and why they do the things they do. He's an amazing storyteller. Like, he can captivate an audience and keep their attention. And that's something that I have been trying to learn over time, because I know that people just don't want to hear information. They love stories. And you have to become a good storyteller in order to keep people's attention. And like, I'll tell you a little funny thing. When I was growing up, my brothers used to like rag on me because I was a terrible storyteller, I think. And that probably has had an impact on my life, because I was like, I would tell these stories and people would be like, come on, tell the story already. Blah, blah. He's terrible at telling stories. And so, to be honest, I know that if you're a good storyteller, you can like keep an audience like really engaged. So that's one thing about Simon, is he keeps his audience like engaged the entire time he's talking. He keeps them on edge, very, very lively. And so that's one thing I think I can learn from him continuously over time, is to how to be a good storyteller, an amazing storyteller. He's willing to say the opposite of what people want to hear. And I think it takes somebody that has a lot of conviction and wants to see change in the world in order for people to listen to what you have to say, even though it's not something they probably don't want to hear, especially leaders and owners of companies and people that maybe are stuck in their ways. And then the last thing is, I think he's a pretty realistic person as well. He tells this story about, I remember he was doing a interview with Tom Bilyeu, and in the interview, he gave a story about like, how do you know when you're in love with somebody? And he used, how do you know when you get in shape? And he was like, you don't really know when you get in shape, but there are things that you do over time that you just continuously do. And he uses an example about brushing your teeth. And he's like, people have good teeth because they brush their teeth twice or 2 minutes a day, twice a day. And you don't really think like, man, like my teeth are going to be perfect and they're going to be the best ever all the time. No, you do that on a consistent basis, day in and day out, because that's the regime. That is what you're supposed to do every day in order to keep healthy teeth, even though you can still get cavities and everything like that. But that is along with the health and wellness. And it really, like, his analogies and his stories really hit home for me. And I want to go into the videos that I think you should watch, because there are 3 different presentations that are very, very impactful. One is Start With Why, the TED Talk that he gave 15 years ago at this point, which is crazy. It has over 21 million views. And then the next one is Leaders Eat Last. And that talks about how leaders need to put their organization and their people before themselves. And he explains why that is. And it makes sense, but he was saying it in a time when I think a lot of leaders were putting themselves before their people, and it was really hurting organizations. And the last one is The Infinite Game. And The Infinite Game to me is 2019, and there's like, I think 9 million views on that video, but it really helped me understand how business is an infinite game. And it helped me with fly bodies and thinking, if you have a really long outlook on making your company the best it can be, then you're not thinking like, oh, I need to sell this in a year from now, or I need to make, $500,000 next year, something like that. Or I need to have like 1 million followers by, 3 years from now. It was something, him defining what an infinite game is and what a finite game is was super helpful in me understanding how long it takes and the outlook you can have on business, because you really can't win the business game. It goes on forever. And I'll go into that a little bit. But some of the quotes that I loved from the why, finding your why, I'm losing my train of thought here. I'm going back to finding your why. Sorry. There are a lot of quotes from the Start With Why presentation that he did for TED Talks. And like I said, he talked about Apple and how they were so innovative, MLK and how he was able to lead a civil rights movement, and then also the Wright brothers and how they were able to become the first in flight, and they had like zero resources in order to do that, but they owned a bike company or a bike shop that funded their passion for flying. And one of there are a couple of quotes that I remember from his talk, and a couple of them were, he said, about 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery. This discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and that profoundly changed the way I operate. And when I hear that, it's so impactful for me, because one, he's been really defining this Start With Why for 3.5 years, right? He didn't think about it yesterday. He's been really cultivating this thought process on Start With Why. And it took him 3.5 years to have this TED Talk for 18 minutes to explain all of this. So like 3.5 years in 18 minutes. And I think that's super interesting, because a lot of times we think we go 3 months, 6 months, a year, and we just go, oh, it didn't work, maybe next time. Whereas it goes to the infinite game of like saying, okay, this may take 2, 3, 4, 10 years, but if I keep trying to really define what I'm trying to do here and make the best of what I do, I can make something great. And so that was the first thing that I really grabbed my attention when he was doing his talk. Is 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery, and he talked about it. And then he said, as it turns out, there's a pattern. All great inspiring leaders and organizations in the world communicate, think, and act the exact same way. And it's complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. So that sentence, that paragraph right there spoke to me in the sense of like, the people that really want to make big change in this world have to think differently than the people that are just in the cog, in the wheel, just going along with what society is doing. So that made a big impact on me, because a lot of like 90 to 95% of people are just going along with what society is telling them to do. But the greatest change makers in the world have looked at what the world is doing and said, you know what, I think I can do something different, and I think I can do it better, and I think the world needs this. All right. And then he said, all I did was codify it. And so it's kind of cool, because like when you hear somebody say that, you're like, okay, well, he's got the answer. He's got the algorithm that somebody should do. And so if you follow this, it's going to help you make that kind of change. And he talked about the golden circle. The golden circle. And when you watch this video, he talks about the golden circle, saying start with why in the middle. The why you do something is going to seep out into everything that you do. It's going to it's going to define how you do things and then what you do. And so if you start with the why, then you understand what it takes to actually get your vision or mission done. And one thing I'll say on that is that some people, a lot of young people these days, since there's so much information out there and you hear information about like, oh, find your passion, or you should do something that you love doing, or like something that is, there's something just made for you to do. You need to find out what it is. But what I'll say on that topic is that you need to actually just do things in general, because there is paralysis by analysis. And a lot of times people just continuously overthink things. There's so many options. There's paradox of choice. There's so many different lanes we can go in, because there's, endless amounts of jobs we can have, endless amounts of foods we can eat, endless amounts of workouts we can do. But at some point you have to pick something and do it, so that you can get feedback and understand yourself a little more. So you actually have to do something in order to know if that is your why, right? So that's the one thing that I think is super helpful, is for me anyway, is that you have to actually do stuff to understand what you like and you don't like. You can't just not do things and expect you to find out what you love to do. So just making a move, doing something will allow you to figure out, oh, like I enjoy doing this. Oh, I don't like doing this. I'm not going to do that anymore. Maybe I'll do this for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and I'll find out, especially when you're young, you can do a lot of different things. Anyways, so back to it. One of the best lines from this TED Talk was, Simon goes, people don't buy what you do. People buy why you do it. And he said it again. People don't buy what you do. People buy why you do it. And I think that's so important, because storytelling is super important, and why you do something is very important. And I think with Fly Bodies, if we tell them like, hey, we want to make the healthiest world possible, and we want to help people be their healthiest selves, and that's our core why, and we're going to do it in any different way we can, following that why is super, super helpful. Now, one little thing that I thought was hilarious during this TED Talk was 5 minutes in, somebody comes out and changes the microphone during this TED Talk. And it was hilarious, because I'm like, this TED Talk's been watched 21 million times. It wasn't perfect. The TED Talk wasn't perfect. They had to change microphones. And so it's just amazing to me that something that can be watched 21 million times, the microphone wasn't great during the first 5 minutes, but it didn't matter because the talk was so impactful. Okay. And I just thought that was a little minute thing that I saw during the whole thing, that it kind of hit me. It was like, man, this wasn't perfect. It was, there were some mess ups, and I'm sure if Simon went back, he would do things differently, but he did the talk. All right. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with the people who believe what you believe. Love that quote. Here's another one. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. And I think that's important, because I think Simon really understands that the more people understand themselves, the more that they can understand the world. And I believe that that's the case when Fly Bodies approach is we want people to really understand themselves and have confidence that they understand themselves, so that they can help others in the world do other things. Because when you know yourself really, really well, then you're not always guessing of like, oh, what do I really like? Or what do I really need? What does my body need? How do I need to work out? All these things. When you can take care of yourself, you can take care of others way more. Then the last things I will talk about in this start with why is, he talked about the Wright brothers. And this is what really gets me excited a lot of times is, he said, I'll just read this off. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 from the War Department to figure out this flying machine. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He hired the best minds money could buy, and market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Pierpont Langley. 100 miles down the road in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright had none of what would be considered a recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers team had a college education. Both, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was that the Wright brothers were motivated by a belief and cause that it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley wanted to be rich and famous. And I think that's very inspiring to me, because a lot of times the people who don't have the best resources have the most passion, because you have so much, you have to have perseverance and resilience to be able to overcome a lot of things in order to make the thing that you want to make. And on the last thing that Simon said was, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. As you can hear, and this was weird. As he said that, a plane, you could hear a plane. I don't know if it was actual like a plane in the sky, or they did it as part of his talk, which would have been weird, but you could hear a plane fly over in the background during his talk, which I thought was interesting. We didn't find out about the Wright brothers until days later. And then once they made it, Samuel Pierpont Langley said, "Hey, I'm done," and was done. So this talk was just so inspirational when I was in college, because I had a dream when I was really, really young that I wanted to be an Olympian. And when I was, I think, a sophomore, freshman in college, or junior in college, I think they said that sevens rugby was going to be an Olympic sport. And I was like, oh my God, this is my opportunity to be an Olympian. And so I had big aspirations, and a lot of my teammates were just playing because they wanted to have fun, and they were going to go be pilots after, or they were going to go do the Air Force job after. And I wanted to maximize my potential in that area of my life. And when I heard this, it really spoke to me, because I was like, man, is trying to reach people and inspire them, hopefully, to be the best they can be. And if you start with why, you can really lead a big movement. It had a major impact. I think it definitely made me bang my head against the wall when I was younger, because I was like, man, people just want to have fun and drink and not work hard. And I was all about like, hey, I want to do big things, and I want to really put all my time and effort towards something that's great. And it was like, I was fighting an uphill battle a lot of times, but it definitely kept me inspired. And it was fun to hear this talk when I was that young. So if you haven't listened to Start With Why on TED Talks, it's really, really good. I highly recommend going to listen to that if you want some inspiration. And then the next two talks, one is Leaders Eat Last, and then the next one is The Infinite Game. And he kind of has a theme, I would say, in his talks. And one of them is he really tries to explain biology in the human body. Leaders Eat Last, he's an amazing storyteller. So in the beginning of Leaders Eat Last, he talks about Johnny Bravo, a pilot in the Air Force, and how he basically helped save like 22 soldiers in battle that took on fire. And he was an A-10 pilot and helped take him down. But he tells a story, an amazing story. And then he goes into talking about the 4 chemicals that drive all of us and are very important that leaders need to understand. And the acronym for the chemicals is EDSO, EDSO. Endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And then he actually talks about cortisol at the end as well. It's so fun to hear, because I think those biological entities really have an impact on who we are and what we do. And it was cool to hear him talking about those in 2013, right? Like, listening to Simon break these things down, it's like he's ahead of his time and understands how your brain and neurotransmitters can shape the way we act on a daily basis. And it's just like more information that we know about ourselves. We can use that to be successful. And he said, I'll read this for you. He said, the responsibility of leaders is 2 things: to determine who gets in and who doesn't get in the inner circle. And this means to start with why and what we believe. So that was his big thing in his talk, was that leaders have to protect their people. And how you protect those people is you are the one who allow people into your organization, and you're the one who can tell people to get out. And I look at fly bodies in this way, in the sense of like, I never want to bring in somebody that's going to be a toxic worker in fly bodies, because that will be very, very tough for the company to grow in the way I want it to grow. And just listening to that drives it even home even more. And then the second thing he said of the 2 things that leaders need to take responsibility is decide how big we make our circle for the safety of the company and the belonging of the people. So how big do you want your company to be? So who you let in and how big you want the company to be. And then during this talk, he talks about how we are programmed to want to be the alpha in our groups. And alphas, once you are the alpha in your group, you are supposed to take care of the other people in your group, because they are the ones who allowed you to be the alpha, right? he brings up the movie 300 and how people, the alpha, everyone protects the alpha, and then the alpha has to sacrifice themselves for the betterment of the group if that is what is needed. All right. Then the last thing, the infinite game, and this was very important because there are I'm getting tired talking about this because it's just so much information, and I want you guys to understand this. There's finite games and then there's infinite games. And if you have at least one competitor, you are in a finite game or an infinite game. There are two types, the finite game and infinite game. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and agreed upon objective. A football game is a great finite game example. A infinite game is defined as known and unknown players. The rules are changeable, and the objective is perpetual. The objective is to keep the game going. When you pit a finite player against a finite player, the system is stable. When you do the same thing with an infinite player and an infinite player, the same goes and the game is stable. A problem arises when you pit a finite player against an infinite player. And he uses Vietnam as a example of this and says that like the North Vietnamese were like, hey, this is an infinite game we're playing. We're never going to give up. And the Americans were like, no, we're going to win, and we're going to win at this year, this month, blah, blah, blah. And that's why Americans ended up having to leave, because the North Vietnamese were like, we're never going to give up. So those were a finite player going against an infinite player. The only true competitor in an infinite game is improving, which is really interesting, because infinite, if you think of business in an infinite game, you can constantly get better and constantly improve yourself and try to make your company as best as it can be. So that's where I'm going to leave it. If you have time, go listen to one of those 3 videos on Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek provides as a presentation. He does an incredible job of giving really, really good information that help you in business and life and sports, and really breaks things down for you and makes things very digestible and easy to understand. And he's inspirational. Great storyteller. I think I've said that many times, but we can all strive to have some of his qualities. And that's all I got. I'll be doing this to give you guys people that I think have been impactful in my life. And hopefully, if you haven't heard of these people, you can go check them out and they can be positive impact on your life. And that's all I got. Hopefully, guys enjoyed that. If you have any comments or questions or feedback, I'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching, and get after it.